February 25th, 2022. A calm day on the coast of Trinidad and Tobago would soon descend into horror. What began as a routine underwater maintenance job spiraled into one of the most chilling maritime tragedies the nation has ever witnessed. Trinidad and Tobago, an island nation in the southern Caribbean, is home to one of the most significant oil and gas industries in the Western Hemisphere. The energy sector contributes more than 40% of the country's GDP and employs thousands of workers across the region. Among the critical components of this industry is the network of underwater pipelines that carry fuel to and from offshore facilities. These pipelines must be regularly maintained and repaired to prevent leaks and ensure the continuous flow of energy resources. But on February 25th, 2022, a routine maintenance operation at Paria Fuel Trading Company's number 36 berth, located at Pointe-à-Pierre, would change the lives of 5 commercial divers forever. LMCS Limited, a privately owned and experienced local diving contractor, was responsible for handling the Paria Fuel Trading Company's routine underwater maintenance. LMCS had years of experience working on high-risk jobs and had built a solid reputation within the energy sector. That day, the team of divers included 35-year-old Kazim Ali Jr., the son of LMCS's founder, an experienced diver with years of hands-on work under his belt. 36-year-old Yusuf Henry, a professional known for his resilience and technical skills. 48-year-old Rishi Nagasar, a seasoned diver who had been working with LMCS for years. 55-year-old Fitzroy Johnson, a veteran in the field, whose decades of diving experience earned him respect within the community. And lastly, Christopher Boudrum, who would ultimately survive the ordeal and be the key witness to the chain of events. The job was part of a maintenance procedure to repair an underwater 36-inch pipeline that runs between berth 5 and berth 6 at Paria Fuel Trading's loading terminal. The pipeline, critical for moving oil and fuel products, was undergoing regular maintenance due to issues with corrosion and minor leaks. The task was considered routine for experienced divers like the LMCS crew, but the risks of working inside a confined pipeline are ever present. Even the smallest change in pressure can lead to disaster. Around 2:30 p.m., as the divers worked inside the pipeline, something went catastrophically wrong. A sudden Delta P incident, a powerful and deadly force caused by a significant difference in pressure, was triggered. The Delta P created a vacuum, sucking the divers into the pipeline with immense force. As water rushed from an area of high pressure to an area of lower pressure, the divers found themselves caught in this overwhelming current. Differential pressure incidents, commonly known as Delta P events, occur when water moves rapidly between 2 areas of unequal pressure. This sudden pressure shift creates a powerful suction that can easily trap objects, or in this case, people, inside confined spaces such as pipes. The suction created by Delta P is nearly impossible to resist, even for the strongest divers. Once the men were drawn into the pipe, the force trapped them deep inside, sealing their fate within seconds. At the surface, panic spread quickly among the LMCS support team. Christopher Boudrum, who had been closer to the surface when the suction began, managed to escape the full force of the Delta P and was pulled to safety. But for the other 4 men, the situation was dire. Boudrum's harrowing escape provided the first clue to what had happened beneath the surface. He was immediately hospitalized, suffering from the effects of decompression and shock. In interviews later, Boudrum would recall the terrifying moment he realized his friends were trapped inside the pipe, unable to escape. Rescue operations were immediately initiated by LMCS personnel, but the situation inside the pipeline was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The pipeline was a massive 36-inch tube, more than a kilometer long, with various twists, turns, and blind spots. Finding and retrieving the men alive would require expertise, equipment, and most importantly, time. However, time was not on their side. The divers had been inside the pipeline for hours, trapped without a fresh air supply. The lack of oxygen, combined with the dangers of decompression sickness, meant every minute was crucial. The trapped divers would only have a limited amount of breathable air. By late afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago's Coast Guard, the fire services, and specialized diving teams were on site. However, despite the arrival of these agencies, the situation rapidly became bogged down in confusion, logistical challenges, and safety concerns. In the critical hours after the accident, one glaring issue emerged. No specialized rescue divers were sent in to retrieve the trapped men. Rescue teams feared further complications, including the risk of additional Delta P incidents or underwater hazards, delaying the efforts. The timeline of events is critical to understanding what happened during those fateful hours. February 25th, 2:30. The Delta P incident occurs, trapping the 4 divers inside the pipeline. February 25th, 3 p.m., LMCS initiates internal rescue efforts but cannot reach the men. February 25th, 5 p.m., Trinidad and Tobago. Coast Guard and other agencies arrive, but no divers are sent into the pipeline. February 26th, early morning. Rescue operations are still at a standstill as officials determine how to proceed. February 27th, 48 hours after the incident, the bodies of Yusuf Henry and Kazim Ali Jr. are recovered from the pipeline. February 28th, the remaining bodies of Rishi Nagasser and Fitzroy Johnson are retrieved, marking the official end of the recovery operation. By the time the last of the divers were recovered, hope of finding anyone alive had vanished. Trinidad and Tobago was left in mourning. The aftermath of the tragedy hit the families of the victims with a devastating force. Relatives of the divers gathered at the scene in the hours and days following the incident, hoping and praying for good news. Instead, they were met with a slow trickle of grim updates. Among the most vocal was Nazira Ali, the mother of Kazim Ali Jr. In interviews, she tearfully recounted how she begged authorities to send in divers immediately, fearing that time was slipping away. Other family members echoed this sentiment, expressing anger and frustration at the perceived delays in the rescue efforts. The tragedy quickly became a flashpoint of national debate. How could 4 trained divers working under the supervision of a major energy company end up trapped and unable to be rescued in time? In the weeks following the accident, there were numerous protests and public outcries for justice. Citizens and relatives of the victims demanded answers. Why wasn't the rescue faster? What safety protocols were in place? And who, if anyone, would be held accountable for the deaths of the divers? Paria Fuel Trading Company and LMCS Limited both faced significant public scrutiny. Although Paria insisted that the rescue delays were a matter of safety, many questioned whether the response had been adequate. In the months following the tragedy, an official investigation was launched by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, along with other independent experts. The goal was to determine what caused the Delta P incident, whether any protocols were violated, and whether the rescue efforts had been mismanaged. Some of the key questions centered on the following. 1. Why wasn't the Delta P event anticipated? Were the divers made aware of the potential dangers beforehand? 2. Did LMCS follow all necessary safety protocols during the pipeline repair? 3. Was Paria Fuel Trading Company properly monitoring the operation? The tragedy raised broader questions about the regulatory framework governing Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector. Were companies like Paria Fuel Trading and LMCS being held to strict enough safety standards? And more importantly, were those regulations being properly enforced? Lawmakers debated these issues fiercely in Parliament, with calls for stricter oversight of offshore operations, better emergency preparedness, and clearer protocols for handling accidents of this magnitude. Some argued that the disaster was a wake-up call, revealing systemic weaknesses that needed urgent reform. As the investigation continued, the nation mourned the loss of 4 men who died while working to keep Trinidad and Tobago's energy sector running. Memorial services were held in their honor, and their families continued to push for accountability and change. The Paria diving tragedy became more than just an accident. It became a symbol of the risks faced by those who work in the energy industry, and a reminder of the need for constant vigilance when dealing with dangerous operations. Months after the tragedy, the waters off Pointe-à-Pierre have returned to their usual calm. But for the families and colleagues of the lost divers, life will never be the same. The questions surrounding that fateful day remain, questions about what could have been done differently and what must change to prevent another catastrophe. For many, the Paria diving tragedy represents a call to action, a demand for better safety standards, quicker response times, and a commitment to ensuring that no more lives are lost in the depths of Trinidad's oil pipelines. As the nation waits for the final report from investigators, the legacy of this tragedy will not be forgotten. It will serve as a reminder of the high stakes in the energy industry and the importance of protecting those who work to power the world. In memory of the Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, Rishi Nagasar, Fitzroy Johnson. They were sons, fathers, husbands, and friends, men who went to work that day and never came home.